So from an economic perspective, ads are often used for two main reasons. The first reason is ads are informative. They work to create awareness amongst the target market. And the second big reason is because ads are persuasive. They help people change their preferences. They convince them to like something else instead of what they might already be liking before. Now, when it comes to these presidential elections, the primary role of advertising is more persuasive rather than informative, because the candidates are already well known, people are aware of who they are, and the primary roles that advertising is playing in this particular situation is to convince the voter to like one kind of a candidate more than the other kind of the candidate in the market. So in a sense, what you're doing is that you're going after a fixed pool of voters and trying to get as many of them as possible to your side. So in that sense, these advertisements are also often very combative. They tried to get a voter at the expense of another in this particular market. So businesses and politicians often use attack ads. The reason being because more often than not, they do work. And they work in certain situations. And it has to be very carefully analyzed as to what kind of situations you expect them to work and not work. Now, many times you see people engage in attack ads primarily because their competitor is doing it. And it's like a prisoner's dilemma kind of a situation. Most of the time, none of them wants to do it, but if one of them starts doing it, then the other one has to respond. Otherwise, you end up losing critical share in this particular market. So what our research on combative advertisements has shown is that when you use these kinds of attack ads or combative ads, one has to be very careful about the level of engagement one expects from the audience in this market. And whether the ads turn out to be effective or not critically depends on this level of engagement in the market. So what we find is that when audiences are really engaged, then attack ads can work, because these can lead to these audiences forming their preferences in a better manner and actually leading to partisan voters in the market. But if the audience is not as engaged, then attack ads could really be ineffective and in a sense just create more disinterested voters out there in the marketplace. So we believe that the reason this happens is because of the way your audience might process this information. So for instance, if people are very engaged, then what happens is that when they listen to all these attack ads, they actually process the information or the messages or the arguments within those ads fairly carefully. And as a consequence of processing those messages, they're able to form their own opinions carefully. And once they form their opinions, they either shift towards one position or the other. And this leads to creating bipartisan preferences in the market. And this leads to creating more strong voters in the market. But imagine a situation where the audience is not very interested or not very engaged. Then what happens is that as a consequence of not being engaged, they view these attack ads as just that, simply one candidate going after the attack after the another for making an attack rather than doing anything more constructive. And once this happens, they tend to process this as just noise, and instead of becoming more partisan, they actually become more indifferent and pile up towards the center of the market. And so we are already seeing that happen in this current election, as has been reported by the Washington Post and a few other news articles, that what we are seeing in many of these swing states is that voters are actually becoming fed up with all this noise that they are hearing on television, and many of them are actually yearning for just used car sales ads rather than election ads, and they're really ready to stop listening to these messages at this point in time. So the bottom line from our research is that when you're using attack ads, you really have to be very mindful about the audience and the target audience that you're going after. So it doesn't make sense to use attack ads in all kinds of situations. Whether or not you use attack ads really should depend on the level of engagement that you expect within the audience that you're going after. And depending on that level of engagements, you have to make the strategic decision of should you use attack ads or some other ad format to go after these in an effective manner. Thank you.